Okay, another question I get a lot is, well, I just got it recently, is the overshot technology thing, where, especially with paleo and Clovis technologies, they call the Clovis a technology and they call many things technologies. It gets kind of confusing sometimes. But the idea is with overshot technology is you create overshots on purpose. That's the basic idea. And the idea is the napper is so skilled that something that is normally considered a mistake is actually done on purpose to create an effect. So the flint napper sets up his platforms, sets up the surface of the workpiece, strikes it just the right way to create a full-length flake, and then take off the other side on purpose. That's the technology. That's the idea. All right. Now, do I think that that is a technique that was both practiced over a wide area and from one generation to the next? Yes. However, I think it's incidental and not intentional. Okay? So what I mean by that is when you are in the process of thinning down your workpiece, I consider the thinning to be the technology and the overshot to be one of the results of your technique. So when you're thin, you can get overshots, right? But you can also get mid-range flakes on purpose. You can also get step fractures by accident, okay? You can get these bites into the edge where you're striking. You can get different flaws as a result of your thinning process. You can get snap, you can get end shock, you can get all kinds of things related to thinning, the thinning process. And I think overshot is one of those things that is a result of the thinning process. So if you are thinning and you get an overshot, it's one of those things that you just might have ruined your piece. Sometimes you throw it out because it just gets too narrow, right? Now, are you able to minimize the effect to such an extent and become skilled at minimizing that effect to such an extent that it can be actually something that you employ on purpose as part of your napping? Yes. How common is that? Not very common. Is it considered a technology? If it's not very common, I consider it a high level of skill and not a technology. The technology for me in this case is thinning or flattening. If you're employing mostly overshot and you're highly skilled, the only reason I can think of where you would employ something like that is to achieve a very flat surface. Because you can make a point, beautiful point, without overshot. Like the Sweetwater biface does not exhibit, as far as I know, any overshot technology. And those Cadoan blades don't. But they're extremely thin and flat. All right? So I think that, this is my opinion, so just take it with a grain of salt. I think the overshot technology is a result of the technology of thinning and is not a technology in itself. So I never call it that. I just say overshots are overshots. Now you can minimize it. You can get nitpicky and say, well, if you're minimizing it and you're using it a lot and you're highly skilled and you're teaching it to other people and it gets passed down from one generation to the next and also gets passed to your neighbors, or you could learn it and use it, it's a technology. Yes, it is. But is it common? No. For me, a technology needs to be more broad. Like you can teach a beginner how to thin, but you cannot teach a beginner how to overshoot with minimal adverse effects. You know what I mean? So the technology is the thinning, and the result is, one of the results is overshot. Another result from thinning is a perfect flake that goes all the way across and feathers out before it takes out the other side. To me, that is the more skilled version of a long flake than the overshot. The overshot indicates to me a level of a lack of skill, whereas the true skill would be to shoot it all the way across but terminate in the feather termination just before it takes off the other edge. Now that is what I consider a thinning flake that would achieve the same result and conserve material, and that can be passed on and all that as far as the technique goes. And I believe that there's a lot of confusion on the issue. Now, are there overshots in other time periods, and not just the Clovis or not just the Paleo? Yes. And there are overshots that I see on archaic artifacts and such. There's a lot of them that I've seen that are discards. After you get an overshot, you just discard it. For some reason, a lot of the artifacts in the archaic period are discarded when there's a slight mistake. I guess they had access to a lot of material. The weather was better and all that kind of stuff. They were able to travel and find more. Whereas in the Paleo period, obviously it was colder. The ground was probably frozen in larger areas of the country. There's a lot of flint in the northern part that was not accessible, so the people would have to migrate into areas that were not susceptible to ground freeze. So it limited their supplies, which they had to conserve their material more. So they wouldn't be using techniques that waste a lot of material. And overshot is one of the techniques that actually wastes material. Especially if you're an experienced napper and you sit down and you try to do the overshots, you're going to be successful maybe 1 out of 4 times. That's not very good odds. Okay, so that's just my opinion, and that's how I assess it. So I got the question, and I kind of answered it in maybe a smug way. And I apologize that if I was harsh on the answer, but to me, it's just a gimmick that people have come up with as far as the word technology attached to overshot in order to draw attention to themselves. Okay.